satisfaction problem, you will have to satisfy a certain set of constraints, and that becomes your goal state. So your goal state is a state which satisfies a given set of constraints. For example, you have a crypto arithmetic problem where you have certain letters, and some equation is given to you from those letters, like an equation like this: send plus more is equal to money. So that is basically this S, E, N, D, all the letters in this equation. Send plus more is equal to money. In this equation, all the letters will have some unique value. And you will have to basically find the unique values of each and every letter such that it satisfies that given equation. That is a crypto arithmetic puzzle. Fine. So if it satisfies the equation, then it is said to have satisfied the constraint, basically. So that is an example of a constraint satisfaction problem. Similarly, many design tasks in manufacturing, and while movement of goods in an assembly line, you follow certain constraints. So that is an example again of a constraint satisfaction problem. Planning an optimal travel tour covering major spots and with minimal expenses of resources. So this is also a constraint that you want to cover all the cities and with a minimal resource expense. So that is also a constraint satisfaction problem. So basically it is not a new search strategy. It is basically a list of constraints that will evolve as the problem is solved. And finally, when you reach the goal state, all your constraints are satisfied. So this is the algorithm for constraint satisfaction problem. Until a complete solution is found or until all paths have led to dead ends, what you do is you select a node of the search graph and you apply the constraint rules, basically the constraint inference rules to that node to generate the possible new constraints. So basically you are every time from a particular node of the tree, you are trying to generate the constraints which are possible. Right. So you generate the new constraints, and so basically you are trying to generate the constraints again, more and more constraints, such that you reach a goal state where all the constraints are generated. Right. So basically you take a node and you select, you apply the constraint inference rules to that node to generate all possible new constraints. Now, if the constraints are actually describing the goal state, that means you have found, so you will report a success. Otherwise, if the set of constraints contains a contradiction means that a particular constraint is basically contradicting with some other constraint. So basically you have generated some constraints and now you generate some other constraints from this node. So you keep on generating more and more constraints. Out of these constraints, if some of the constraints actually is contradicting with some earlier generated constraint, so then it is basically a dead end. That path is a dead end because it will not reach towards a solution because you have found some contradictory constraints. That means you cannot solve the constraint satisfaction problem in that case. If you have found the goal state with all the constraints, so then you will report success. If neither a contradiction nor the solution has been found, so if you are not able to find a solution also, or you have not found a contradiction also, then you are somewhere in between basically. So what you do is then you generate some new constraints from these existing constraints. So basically you generate a constraints from a node, then you check whether it is the final set of constraints or whether it is a contradictory constraint. If none of the case is happening, that means it is not a contradictory constraint nor it is a final set of constraints. Then you generate some more constraints from this existing set of constraints. So they are basically the new partial set of solutions basically, so that are consistent with the existing constraints. So you basically add some new constraints to the existing constraints which are derived from the existing constraints basically, right? And then you basically now you have a new set of constraints. So from those new set of constraints, again you basically derive some other set of constraints and so on. Fine. So basically this process keeps on repeating itself, like you keep on generating the new constraints from the existing constraints and so on until you reach a state where you cannot generate any more new constraints. Fine. So if you are not able to generate any more new constraints, then your process is basically stable. You are not able to progress further, right? So in that case, when you are not able to generate any new constraints from the existing constraints, so in that case, what you do is you make a guess. So you have some constraints with you. Now what you do is in that those constraints must be involving certain variables, right? So the constraints might be between certain within some variables, like this variable is constrained in such a way, the other variable is constrained in such a way, like this. So you'll have a constraint on the variables basically, right? So what you do is, for you, those constraints are there, but you cannot progress further because you cannot derive any more new constraints. So in that case, what you do is you make a guess at the value of some variable in that constraint. Fine. So you take a constraint and you make a guess at the value of some variable in that constraint in order to strengthen that constraint. So now you have got a value guessing you have done for that variable. So your constraint will become even more stronger, right? So you get a new constraint basically out of the existing one. And now what you do is, now you have got a new constraint that is a more stronger constraint because you have replaced the value of the variable. So now you again invoke the constraint satisfaction algorithm with this new constraint along with the existing set of constraints. So now you have got this new constraint by guessing the value. So that means now you again invoke your algorithm again. So you repeat the steps 2 to 7 again, and then you try to generate the new constraints now. Because now your constraint has changed. You got the value guessing in one of the constraints. So now you got one new constraint. From that new constraint, you can generate some other new constraints and so on until you reach a goal state where all the constraints are generated, and basically that means that you are able to satisfy all the constraints. So this is important, the step number 8. So when you are not able to generate any more new constraints from the existing set of constraints, then you make a guess at the value of some variables involved in the constraints, and then you again keep on generating new constraints from that state onwards until you reach the final set of constraints. So this is basically the algorithm for constraint satisfaction. Now let us take an example of how to solve a crypto-arithmetic problem using the constraint satisfaction algorithm. So what is a crypto-arithmetic problem? You have basically certain characters are there, and each character has got a unique value between 0 to 9. So it will always be between 0 to 9, right? Because it's a single digit number which we assign to each character. So crypto-arithmetic problem is a problem where the numbers are encrypted as alphabets. So each alphabet will have some unique value between 0 to 9. Now, since I'm saying between 0 to 9, so that means if you add two characters, they can maximally reach up to 19, isn't it? Because I'm saying two characters are there and both of them can have a maximum value of 9. So that means the total, if I take the addition of both the characters, the maximal I can reach is up to 19. 9 plus 9. Why I'm saying 19? Because 9 could be the value of the first variable and 9 could be the value of the second variable. Plus, if there is a carry, if there is a carryover from the previous letter, then plus 1 you can do for the carry. So 9 plus 1, that will be 19. And if there is no carry, then it will be 18. So carry flag is 0 or 1 depending upon the values. If it is 1, then maximal you can reach up to 19 as a sum of two characters. Right? So let us take this example. So this is an example of a constraint satisfaction problem. If you have, let us say A into B is equal to KB. So this is your constraint which you want to satisfy. A into B should be equal to KB. Fine. So what are the possibilities? You want that if you are multiplying A by B, then the result should be KB. So that means the first digit can be anything, that means K, and the second digit should be actually this number, the second number with which you are multiplying. So the second digit of the result should be actually the second number with which you are multiplying. So what are the possibilities? If you take 3 into 5, so if you take 3 into 5, then you will basically, if you generate 3 into 5, it will be 15. So this is satisfying the constraint because if you see here, the second number with which you are multiplying, that is 5. And the second digit of the result is also 5, right? So in this case, you can say that you are able to satisfy the constraint given to you, which is A into B is equal to KB. Then if you see the second example, 7 into 5 is equal to 35. Again, the second digit is 5 in 35 and the number is also 5. The second number is also 5. So this is also satisfying. Then 9 into 5 is equal to 45, again satisfying. Or otherwise you can have some other possibilities also. For example, if you do 6 into 2 is equal to 12, then again it is the second number and second digit are same, so it is satisfying. 6 into 4 equal to 24 and 6 into 8 equal to 48. All these are satisfying. So these are the following possibilities for basically solving this constraint satisfaction problem. So constraint satisfaction problem is given to you, A into B should be equal to KB, right? So the problem is given to you that A into B should be equal to KB. And these are the solutions, possible solutions. So this is one example of constraint satisfaction problem. Then another example, let us see. You have here JE into BB, and the result you are getting is BADE. And in between you are getting JE and JEA. And the final result you are getting of multiplying JE with BB, the final result is BADE. Fine. So you want to find out the value of J and A in this case. And the second thing is, if E is 4, then what will be D? So this is the question given to you. Now the constraint over here is that the letters should satisfy this equation. Fine. And the other constraint is that they should have a unique value. So no two letters can have the same value. Two different letters should have the different values only. So this is another constraint. So now how you will find out the values of J and A? So let's start constraint satisfaction problem algorithm to solve this particular problem. So from the first two of multiplication, see, this is basically JE into B. If you see, how do we multiply? B into JE is equal to JE, right? So how do we multiply? B into JE would be equal to JE. Then the next B into JE would be equal to JEA. Like this we multiply, right? So that means JE into B is actually leading to JE only. So in that case, what should be B? Because JE multiplied by B is returning JE only, so it is obvious that B would be 1. Right? Yes. So B would be 1 in this case. Correct. So that is how we got this B as 1. Right? Now you see, from the second row of multiplication, A would be 0. Why? A would be 0? Because if you see here, B into JE should be actually equal to something, and there should be a cross. Actually, the letters in the second row of multiplication, they should start from the 10th place. But actually the letters are starting from the ones place only. So it's nothing but a 0. A is 0. Why? Because the letters always start filling from, A is 0 because letters always start from the 10th place in multiplication, in the second row of multiplication. But in the second row of multiplication also, you are starting from ones place, so you have to give A as 0. So A is 0 according to that. Fine. Then in the hundreds place, I think somebody, Gunjan, is saying something. B is 1, A is 0, and E plus A is equal to E. Correct. That is also correct. So let us see. Let us see that one. How is it coming? So let us see the solution further. So in the 100th place, if you see, your J plus something is equal to 10. How? See the 100th place. If you see the 100th place, your J plus something is resulting into what? 10. Why 10 I am saying? See, when we add something to the single digit number J, that results in 10. Right? Why I am saying 10? Because A is 0. See this case, students, see here, A is 0. So J plus something should be 0 and 1 carry over. Because B is 1 and A is 0. So that means BA is 10, right? So J plus something is giving us 10. Can you see the 100th place, students? Just see the last J in the second row of multiplication. Just see the last J. So that last J is actually leading to BA. And what is BA? BA is nothing but 10, right? So J plus something is leading to 10. Fine. So J is a single digit number. Fine. J is a single digit number and it is leading to 10. Fine. So what could be J actually? So when we add something to the single digit number that is resulting in 10. So what is that adding thing? What I am adding actually, I cannot add more than 1 because only one, there could be a carry of 1 only. There cannot be a carry of more than 1, right? So always there can be a carry of 1 only. There cannot be a carry of more than 1 because the maximum digit possible by adding two single digit numbers can be either 18 or 19. So if it is a carry, carry is always 1. If you take 18 also or 19 also, carry will be 1 only, right? So in that case, the maximal carry is 1 only. Fine. So if I am adding 1 to some number and that is resulting in 10, so that means that number is 9. Fine. So that's how we get J as 9. So when we add 1 to the single digit number J, we get 10. So that means J is 9. So now we have got B as 1, A as 0 and J as 9. So three things we have discovered till now. So now when J is 9, fine. So let us go back. So J is 9, B is 1 and J is 9, B is 1 and A is 0. These three things we have discovered till now. Now let us try to find out some more constraints. Till now we have found out only three constraints, but still our problem is left to solve. We have not solved the complete problem till now. So let us find out some other constraint. So from the above multiplication, if you see, E plus 9 is equal to D plus 10. How I am getting? E plus 9 is equal to D plus 10. See, J is 9. So that means E plus 9. And since I am saying there is a carryover from this second row of multiplication, there is a carryover to the third row of multiplication, right? Because that's how I got this 10 in the end. So J plus 1, that was giving 10. So that means there is a carryover from the second row. So that means J plus E is equal to D plus 10, right? Because there is a carryover from D. So 10 plus D and J is 9. So that means E plus 9 is equal to D plus 10. Fine. So that's how we get this equation. From the second row of multiplication, we get the equation as E plus J is equal to D plus 10 because there's a carryover, that is why D plus 10 and J is 9. So we replace J as 9. So we get E plus 9 is equal to D plus 10. So that means E minus D is equal to 1. If you rearrange this equation, you will get E minus D is equal to 1. That means E and D have got a difference of 1, right? And it is given to you in the question that E is 4. So that means D is 3. Fine. So that's how you get this final solution. So E is 4 and D is 3. So you replace the value of D as 3 and the other values are already with you. J is 9, B is 1 and A is 0. So finally you get the solution like this. Are you able to understand this example, students? Basically, you have to devise more and more constraints in order to solve a particular problem. And when you get more and more constraints and you are able to satisfy all of the constraints according to the problem, then you are reaching the goal state. Fine. Let us take another example. So let us take now another example. If send plus more is equal to money, then find M plus O plus N plus E plus Y. So this is another example which is given to you, basically this question, and you have to find out the, basically in order to calculate M plus O plus N plus E plus Y, you need to find out the values of all these characters, M, O, N, E and Y, right? So let us start. The equation is send plus more is equal to money. Now, you try to establish the constraints one by one and then try to find out all the constraints and the values of all the variables involved in the constraint. Fine, let us start. So basically, addition of two numbers with n digits results in n plus 1 digits, right? So if you say here, send plus more is resulting in money. So money has got an extra digit, right? On the left hand side, M is that extra digit. So if you say you are adding two single digit numbers, so maximally you can generate a additional number with a value of 1 only, right? Because if you add two single digit numbers which are ranging from 0 to 9, maximum you can get 19. So that is also on the left hand side, it is 1 only. So that means the leftmost place is always 1. If you are adding two single digit numbers, then the leftmost place is always 1, right? If you are adding two single digit numbers and that is generating a double digit number, then the leftmost place is always 1. So that means m is 1, right? So you substitute the value of m as 1. That is the first constraint which you have satisfied, and you got m is equal to 1. Fine. Now, m is 1 and o cannot be 1 because I have established the constraint that no two letters can have the same value. So in this case, o cannot be 1. So o cannot be 1 because m is already 1. Fine. So now you are basically, what should be the value of o? O can be either 0 or can it be 2? Can o be 2? See, if o has to be 2, basically, then in that case, the result is 12 actually, right? Instead of, see, on the left hand side, you have a 1, and if o is 2, that makes it 12. So in that case, when will 12 will come? 12 will come when s plus 1 is equal to 12 or s plus 1 plus 1 is equal to 12, right? Because either a carry is there or not. If the carry is there, then s plus 1 would be 12, or if there is no carry, then s plus 1 would be 12, right? But is this possible? Can s plus 1 be 12? S plus 1 cannot be 12 because s is a single digit number, right? So this is not possible. Can s plus 1 be 12? S plus 1 can also not be 12 because in that case s has to be 10 and s is a single digit number. So this is not possible actually. So o cannot be 2 actually, because if o is 2, then these two equations have to be true, but they are not true. So in that case o cannot be 2. So if o cannot be 2, it cannot be 3 or 4, anything, it cannot be greater than 2 basically, and it is not 1. So what is o actually? It is not 1 because m is already 1. It cannot be 2 or greater than 2 because it will not be able to satisfy this equation. So what is o then? In that case, o would be 0. So in that case, o would be 0, right? So that gives me o as 0. Fine. So that gives me o as 0. So I have got two numbers till now. M is 1 and o is 0. Now, what should be s? See, s can be s plus 1 has to give me 10, or otherwise s plus 1 should be giving me 10. Fine. See, from the leftmost side, if I see the leftmost column, s plus 1 should give me 10, or s plus 1 plus a carry 1 should give me 10, right? Now, if I'm saying s plus 1 should give me 10, s should be 9. Otherwise, if I'm saying s plus 1 should give me 10, then in that case, s should be 8, right? So there is only two possibilities, s is 8 or 9. Now, can it be possible that there is a carry? So can it be possible s plus 1 is giving me 10? Basically, there should be a carryover in that case. So can it be possible that there is a carryover to s? So if s is 8, then there should be a carryover. Is this possible? See, carryover is not possible. Why carryover is not possible? Because if you see the third column, e plus, that is, yeah, e is a single digit number, right? And you are adding a 0 to it. O is 0, right? So e plus 0 is giving me n, and n plus 1. That means if I want a carry, then e should be 9. Maximum I can take e as 9. So if I take e as 9 and e plus 9 plus 1. So if I take maximum e as 9 and there is a carry from the second row also, let us consider. So it will give me 9 plus 1, 10. So in that case, there will be a carryover, but n would become 0. But n cannot be 0 because o is already 0. So n cannot be 0. So in that case, e cannot be 9. If e is 9, then if you have a carryover also, then it will result in 10. And 10 cannot be possible because for 10 to be possible, n should be 0. and n cannot be 0. So maximal possible value of e was 9, but that is not possible actually. So that means there is no carry generated from the third row, e plus 0 is equal to n. From that row, there is no carry possible. So if there is no carry possible, then that means s plus 1 should be 10. S plus 1 is equal to 10 is not a possibility, right? Because there is no carry from the previous row. Fine. So in that case, s plus 1 should be 10. So if s plus 1 is 10, that means s is 9. Right? That's how you get s is equal to 9. Fine. So now you got a third value, that s is 9. Now you get these two equations from you move to the previous column now, the third column, e column, that e plus 0 column. So now from that you establish another equation. From that column you get the equation as e plus 0 is equal to n plus 10, or e plus 0 plus 1 should be n plus 10. Fine. But actually, as I said, that 10 plus n is actually not possible. There is no carry which is possible from this equation. See, even if there was a carry from the previous equation, that means n plus r column, if there was a carry, then it will be e plus 0 plus 1 is equal to 10 plus n. Or if there is no carry, then e plus 0 is equal to 10 plus n. Fine. In both the cases, e minus n would be 10 or e minus n would be 9. Right? But that is not possible. Two single digit numbers, if you take the difference of two single digit numbers, it cannot be 10. And even it cannot be 9 also. So from this we can establish the fact that E cannot be 9. Okay. So basically these equations are not possible. So basically E cannot be 9. So there is no carryover from this column. That's why S was 9. Right? So that's how we came to the conclusion that S is 9 and there is no carryover from the E column. Because if there is a carryover, then this equation should be possible. E plus 0 is equal to 10 plus n, or E plus 0 plus 1 should be 10 plus n. But both the equations are not possible. That means 10 plus n is not possible. So that means there is no carry from this n going upwards to S. So that means S is 9. So till now we established only three values, M, O and S. Now E cannot be 9, we have established this thing. S is 9, so E cannot be 9. So now what is actually the equation governing this E? See, E and N cannot be same, right? So actually the to E you are adding a 0. So E plus 0 is equal to N will make E and N same. But E and N cannot be same because the constraint is no two characters can have the same value. So that means from the previous column there is a carry. So E plus 0 is equal to N is not possible. That will make E is equal to N. So it's not possible. So that means E plus 1 is equal to N is possible. So that means there is a carry from the previous column, N plus R column. Yeah, why E plus 0 should be equal to 10 plus N? It's not equal actually. We are just guessing that if actually E plus 0 is equal to 10 plus N, then whether this equation is possible. If there is a carry, then it will be 10 plus N, right? See, if you are adding E and 0 and you are getting N and you are getting a carry basically. Suppose we are assuming that there is a carry over also. So the number will become 10 plus N. Whatever is the value of single digit number N, you have to add a 10 in order to get the final number, right? So we are testing whether that option is there or not. So that option is not there actually, because if you take E plus 0 equal to 10 plus N, it will generate E minus N is equal to 10. But that is not possible. E minus N can never be 10 because you are taking the difference of two single digit numbers. So that is not possible. And even if you take a carryover from the previous column, that will be E minus N is equal to 9, which is also not possible. That is why I am saying that there is no carryover from this row E plus 0. So it's not generating 10 plus N actually, it's generating only N. There is no carryover. Are you able to get this? Students, are you able to get this? What is happening here? Why these equations are not possible? E plus 0 is equal to 10 plus N and E plus 0 plus 1 is equal to 10 plus N. Are you able to get this, students, or should I repeat? All of you, please respond. I'm not getting only one response I got. What about others? Abhishek and Pranshu only responded. What about others? Are you able to get this equation? Okay, fine. Okay, good. So basically, yeah, fine. Okay. So the equation we have just used this equation to conclude that this n plus n is not possible. This is the only thing which we want to establish from this equation, that there is no carryover generated because these two equations are not possible. So that means there is no carryover possible. So that means S was 9 and E cannot be 9. E cannot be 9, right? If E is 9, then basically E cannot be 9 because these equations are not possible. Fine. So in that case, S is 9. Now, what is the value of, what is the relationship between E and N? So as we already discussed that S is 9, so E cannot be 9. So now E plus 0 should be N, or E plus 0 plus 1 should be N. See, E plus 0 cannot be N because in that case E and N would become equal, and that is not possible. So E plus 0 plus 1 should be equal to N. So that means there is a carry from the previous column, N plus R column, right? So E plus 1 is equal to N. That we have established another new constraint, that E plus 1 is equal to N. And this also makes us conclude that there is a carryover from the previous column, N plus R column. So now let us devise the equation for the next previous column. I mean the N plus R column. So what will be the equation for the N plus R column now? So the possible cases are N plus R is equal to 10 plus E. Just see here, N plus R. That means the next previous column, means that second column from the right hand side. So N plus R column would be equal to 10 plus E, or N plus R plus 1 would be 10 plus E. If there is a carry from the previous column, D and E column, then N plus R plus 1 would be 10 plus E. Otherwise, N plus R would be 10 plus E. Why I am saying 10 plus E? Because I know that there is a carryover. I know that there is a carryover. Why I know that there is a carryover? Because just now I have established the fact that E plus 1 is equal to N. And that 1 I am getting from the carryover of N and R column. So that means there is a carryover that is established 100%. So now N plus R is equal to 10 plus E. That means the carryover is there, so 10 plus E. Otherwise, N plus R plus 1 is equal to 10 plus E. In the case of N plus R plus 1, I am having the carryover from the previous column, D and D column. Fine. So now I got these two cases. So now I know that E is equal to N minus 1 from this equation. I know E is equal to N minus 1. So I substitute this equation, E is equal to N minus 1, in the first equation as well as in the second equation. So if I substitute E is equal to N minus 1 in the first equation, so I'll get N plus R is equal to 10 plus N minus 1. So this gives me R is equal to 9. So that is not possible because S is already 9. So R cannot be 9. So if I substitute in the second equation, I'll get 1 plus N plus R is equal to 10 plus N minus 1, which gives me R as 8. Fine. So only two possibilities are there. That means R is 8. First is not possible, so R is 8. So in this case, R is 8, which means that there is a carryover from the previous column, right? So if R is 8, that means we conclude that there was a carryover from the previous column. That means D and E column, right? So now, till now we have got R as 8, S as 9, M as 1, O as 0, right? Now we are remaining with N and E, and we know that E is equal to N minus 1. So basically, E is the smaller one and N is the larger one. That we know that thing. So N is larger, E is smaller, and there is a difference of 1 between E and N. So now, after this step, so we have got the 4 values of 4 variables. But now after this step, we have actually already established all the constraints. Now there is no more constraint which is possible to derive. right? We know that there is a difference of 1 between n and d. We know that how n and r column are related. So now there is no other new constraint which is possible to derive. Is there any new constraint possible? The only constraint is d plus e is equal to 10 plus y. That we know. D plus e would be equal to 10 plus y from the last column. But that does not derive anything. That does not derive a value. So now actually we have actually exhausted our set of constraints. So we have derived the constraints and were able to find some values. But now from this particular state, we cannot derive any more constraints. So at this point, we try to guess. Okay. So now we try to guess the values. So how do we guess the values? So basically, you know that n and e are consecutive and n is the larger one, right? E is the smaller one. So what you do is, you know that 4 values are already exhausted, 8 is gone, 9 is gone, and 1 and 0 are also gone. 4 variables are already having their values. So that means 8 and 9 is not a possibility. So you start from 7 and 6. So you take n as 7 and e as 6. Fine. Now you check and substitute and you see whether you are able to satisfy this equation, 7 plus more equal to money, using the value of n as 7 and e as 6. If you take n as 7 and e as 6, can you get the unique value for d and y? E is 6. So in that case, d plus e should be equal to 10 plus y, right? So e is 6. So can you get some value of d and y? Please try, students, and see if you are able to get some value which is satisfying the equation d plus e is equal to 10 plus y. Just try. Are you getting or not any unique value for d and y? Waiting for your responses. Anybody who has done? No unique values for D and D? Yes. Why? Because if you see E is 6. Okay. E is 6. And if you take, yeah, you know unique values for D and Y. Because if you see E is 6, so if you add 6 plus 0 is gone, 1 is gone, so you can take D as 2. If you take D as 2, you won't generate a carry. But you know that there is a carry because it is D plus E. D plus E is equal to 10 plus Y. This is your equation. And you know that E is 6. Fine. So in this case, you cannot take D as 2, otherwise it will not generate a carry. So D is not 2. Let us take D as 3. So if you take D as 3, E is 6. Again, it is not generating a carry. So leave 3. Now you go to 4. So if you take D as 4, then it will generate 10. So 10 plus Y will again not be satisfied. So you move on and take D as 5. If you take D as 5, so 5 plus 6 would generate 11. In that case, Y would be 1. But Y cannot be 1 because M is already 1. So this is also not possible. So then you take D as 6. So 6 plus 6. 6 cannot be. Actually, D cannot be 6 because E is already 6. So then you take D as 7. So if you take D as 7, 7 plus 6 would be 13. In that case, Y would be 3. That is possible. 7 plus 6, 13. In that case, Y would be 3. Is that possible, students? Just check and see. In that case, see, if you take D as 7, then 7 plus 6 would be 13. So actually you cannot take D as 7 also because you have taken N as 7. So you cannot take D as 7 because you have guessed the values of N and E as 7 and 6. So 7 is already taken by N. So D cannot be 7 also. And D cannot be 8 also and 9 also because 8 is R and 9 is S. So in that case, there is no value which is possible for D plus E is equal to 10 plus Y. So that means with n and e as 7 and 6, you cannot be able to satisfy, you are not able to satisfy this equation. Now you try with n and e as 6 and 5. So when you try with n and e as 6 and 5, you will get the unique value of values of d and y. Those values are 7 and 2. So if you take 7 as d, so 7 plus e is 6. So that will give me 7 plus, sorry, e is 5. So 7 plus 5 is 12. So y will become 2. So in that case, you are able to get a unique value of d and y. So that means the guess of n as 6 and e as 5 is correct. So finally, you get the values of n and e as 6 and 5 and d and y as 7 and 2. So now you replace the values. So you got s as 9, e as m as 1, o as 0, then n as 6, e as 5, and finally d and y as 7 and 2. So you replace all the values, you will able, and you can verify the result also whether it is satisfying this addition or not. So then in that case, you will get the values of all the variables. So now you have found the values of all the variables. So you can answer the question, what is the value of m plus o plus n plus e plus y? You just add the values 1 plus 0 plus 6 plus 5 plus 2 and you will get this 14. So basically the crux over here is that you keep on establishing the constraints and finding the values of the variables. When you cannot establish any more constraint, then you will need to guess the values of some variables in order to move forward. And then after guessing, you will be able to reach some new constraints. From that, you can progress towards the additional set of constraints until you reach your goal state. Are you able to get this, students? Constraint satisfaction problem. How do we solve this? Okay, all of you are able to understand about these equations, how we got these equations. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. So now let's move forward to means end analysis. This is the last heuristic search technique, means end analysis. So basically for understanding the means ends analysis, we need to basically understand what are the two reasoning techniques. So there are two reasoning techniques, forward reasoning and backward reasoning. So what is reasoning actually? When you are searching, when you are finding the solution and moving from the initial state to the goal state, basically control strategy which moves forward, basically from the start state to the goal state. That is called as a forward reasoning strategy. Okay, forward reasoning approach is the approach where you start with the initial state and move towards the goal state. Fine. In the backward reasoning, you do the opposite. So in the backward reasoning, it is a goal directed control strategy. You begin with the goal state, then you draw some sub goal state from that goal state, then you generate further sub goal states, and basically you are moving in the reverse direction. And you generate the sub goals of those sub goals until you reach the initial state. So basically it's a reverse way. You start from the goal and then you basically move towards the sub goals, then towards sub goals of those sub goals and so on until you reach the initial state. So it's a goal directed strategy where you start from goal and reach towards the initial state. So this is the two reasoning strategies, forward and backward reasoning. Now, basically, when do we adopt forward reasoning and when do we adopt backward reasoning? So there are two factors on which we basically take a decision. Are there more possible start states or goal states? So if basically there are, we generally move from the smaller set of states to the larger set of states. So if we have the start states are smaller and there are more number of goal states, then we will reason forward. Otherwise, we will reason backward. Okay, so if the initial states are smaller and the number of goal states are large, means there are many goal states possible. So in that case, you will do forward reasoning. Otherwise, you will do the backward reasoning. Okay, so this is one thing. For example, you have the integration problem. So in the case of integration problem, you have for example, one expression is given to you. Okay, and from that expression, we need to find the integration of that expression. Okay, so for an integration problem, there could be multiple expressions which are equivalent to that particular expression when you take the integral, isn't it? When you take the integration of a particular expression, then it can be possible that multiple expressions are actually the solutions, right? Basically, when you take the integration, you could have several possible expressions after integrating, and all those would be equivalent to the initial expression only. Yeah, am I correct? Yes or no? See, in the case of integration, there could be many solutions for an integration. It could be like when you are integrating, you get a particular integral, but you can basically integrate, basically make another equivalent expression out of that expression, and that will also be valid. So basically, you can have many goal states in the case of integration. But when you start, you have just one expression to integrate. But when you integrate, you can have multiple equivalent expressions after integration. So there are more number of goal states than the start states in this example. That's why we reason forward in the case of integration. Yeah, start can also be different, but you have been given a question. Okay, this question is given to you to integrate this particular expression. Fine. So but when you take the integration, that could be multiple equivalent integrals existing. That is why I am saying more goal states than the start states. When you take the integration, after integration, there could be multiple equivalent expressions, right? But when you start with a fixed expression that you want to integrate this. So in this case, you could we will say that there are a smaller number of starting states than the goal state. So you reason forward. Now you see another factor. In which direction is the branching factor greater? Okay. So what is a branching factor? Branching factor is the average number of nodes that can be reached directly from a node. Okay. The average number of nodes that can be reached directly from a node. So that means the number of children of that node basically, right? So the number of children of that node. So in which direction is the branching factor greater? We generally proceed in direction with a lower branching factor. Fine. So if the average number of nodes that are directly reachable from a particular node is lower, that means the children are less. So we'll proceed in that direction. Okay. So for example, if you want to prove a theorem, in theorem proving, the axioms from which you want to prove the theorems, the axioms are less because you have, let us say you have 10 rules, and from these 10 rules, you can actually prove a number of theorems, right? You have only 10 rules, and from these 10 rules, you can prove 100 theorems. Theorems can be larger, but the axioms which are existing, the known facts which are existing, those are very less in number. So basically, if you want to do theorem proving, so in this case, the theorem which you want to prove, the theorems could be actually, I mean, there could be many theorems which could be proved from the number of axioms. So axioms are less and theorems are more. So basically, you would proceed in a backward direction. You will try to prove from the theorem towards the axioms, right? Because see, because because if you see the number of axioms are less, and the number of theorems which you can prove is basically many theorems you can prove from a given set of axioms. So in that case, you will reason backward. Why? Because it will be easier to reach towards a particular axiom from a theorem because the axioms are very less. So in that case, your branching factor would be less in the direction of reaching towards the axioms, because from a particular theorem, I mean, from the theorems you can actually devise a particular axiom. I mean, some limited set of axioms, but from your axiom you can get many theorems. So that is why you reason backward in the case of theorem proving, because the branching factor is lower in the case of going from theorem to axiom. Are you getting, students, this thing, or any confusion? Getting or confusion? Is it okay? Okay, fine. Okay, fine. So basically, fine, okay. So basically, these are the two important factors to decide whether you should reason forward or whether you should reason backward. Fine. If there are more possible goal states than the start states, then you will reason forward. Otherwise, you will reason backward. Then the second thing is, if the branching factor is lower in the forward direction, then you will reason forward. Otherwise, if the branching factor is lower in the backward direction from the goal to the initial state, then you will basically go from that direction. Basically, in whichever direction your branching factor is lower, you will go in that direction. So forward reasoning follows a breadth first search, while backward reasoning follows a depth first search. So basically, forward reasoning will generate all the possibilities. So basically, if you are going towards a larger set of states from a smaller set of states, so basically it will generate all the possibilities, right? All the equivalent, for example, in the case of integration problem, forward reasoning would generate all the equivalent integrals, right? So basically you reason, that is why you're reasoning forward, because it can generate all the equivalent integrals. So it is a breadth first approach, because you can generate a many goal states basically. So it's a breadth first approach, and backward reasoning follows a depth first approach. Why I'm saying backward reasoning follows our depth first approach, because it's moving backwards from the goal state towards your initial state, and we are basically proceeding in a direction with a lower branching factor. So that means we are constraining our search towards one branch of the tree only. We are not exploring all the alternatives, because we are proceeding in a direction which has got a lower branching factor. So it's a single, or you can say it's a one branch of the tree. You are not exploring all the alternatives, right? So it's a depth first search. So we have studied integration as an example of forward reasoning and theorem proving as an example of backward reasoning. Now, there could be one problem which is an example of both forward as well as backward reasoning. So basically, it doesn't matter in that example that even if you reason forward or backward, you will basically be able to get the same states. Basically, it will be equally good. Even if you reason forward or backward, it will be equally good. So that example of a problem which in which forward and backward reasoning both can be applied. That is the 8 puzzle problem. Why 8 puzzle problem? Basically, in the 8 puzzle problem, your initial state is basically similar to the goal state only. You have some combination, and in the goal state also you have some combination of letters. So you can you can move from your initial state to the goal state in the same number of steps, and from the goal state to the initial state in the same number of steps. So it doesn't matter whether you reason forward or backward. You can apply either forward reasoning or backward reasoning. Both would be equally good for 8 puzzle problem, because it's just you are moving the you can say you're moving your tiles in a particular combination to reach the goal state. If you do the reverse combination, you will reach the initial state. Fine. So there is no such thing that whether there are more number of goal states or whether there are more number of start states. It will be equal basically. So you can apply either forward reasoning or backward reasoning. In both the directions, the branching factor would be similar only. Are you able to get this, students? Why 8 puzzle problem is an example of both? Should I explain again, or is it okay? Say yes or no, students. I'm waiting for your response. Yeah, so somebody is asking, yeah, Nitin is asking something. If we move, why wouldn't it move forward again to the same? Nitin, you're talking about which problem? If we move backwards, then why wouldn't it move forward? General problem, okay. If we move backwards, then why wouldn't it move forward again to the same forward direction? What is your question? See, it can move. Yeah, it can move actually in any direction. The only thing is which is beneficial to us. So, if whatever, if we do forward reasoning or backward reasoning, then which of the options is better? Because where we will reach the solution faster. That is our aim. So, you can do both the reasonings in any problem. But which reasoning would be better for you in terms of the solution, finding the solution in a faster manner? Yeah, Nitin.
Ma'am, if we are selecting forward reasoning to solve the problem,
Yeah.
then we should have to use forward reasoning for whole of the problem, or for some part of the problem we can use backward reasoning also.
Exactly, exactly. That can also be done. So basically, you can use a mixture of backward and forward reasoning also. It is not the case that you have to always go forward or you have to always go backward. You can use a mixture of that. Okay.
But we will be stuck in a loop. When we are going backward, then again we are going forward because its branching factor is less. Then again we are going backward because its branching factor is less, and then we will be in a loop.
Yes, yes. So no, no. So we don't do it like that. We don't do like forward, then backward, then forward, then backward. We don't do it like that. So that is that is actually the means and analysis concept actually. So basically, what we do is we use a mixture of forward and backward in this way. So what is that way? We solve the major part of your problem. So basically, we will do forward reasoning and solve the major part of the problem. Then we will go back to solve the small problems that have you can say that have arised in gluing the big pieces together. So you have solved the big pieces of the problem using forward reasoning. Then you go backward and solve the small pieces for integrating those bigger solutions of the bigger sub solutions. So you found the sub solutions through forward reasoning. Then you are integrating those sub solutions using backward reasoning. This is the normal strategy which we follow when we want to use a mixture of forward and backward. We don't do it like this forward, backward, forward, backward. We don't do it like this. We solve forward completely using forward reasoning. We solve the major part of the problem. So basically, you break up sub problems and solve that. Then you integrate the sub problems using backward reasoning. Okay, we will see this. How do we do it? We will see this also. Who asked this question? Nitin, you asked. Okay, Nitin. Got it? Okay, fine. So we will continue this in the next class. You have a class now. So we'll continue this in the next class, tomorrow's class. Fine. Divya, please take the attendance. Done? Okay, thank you, Divya. Okay, thank you, all of you. Thank you. Divya, please mail the attendance to me. Okay, thank you, students. Thank you.